mainly geared to the younger folks, but I don't see too many here today. So then we're going to talk about basic tides, the influences or the things that affect the tides, what makes them high, what makes them low, etc., etc. And you'll be surprised at how many factors do influence the tides. Then I'm going to introduce you to the Earth Moon barycenter, because we need to know a little bit about that if we're really going to understand what causes the two bulges on either side of the Earth. I mean, everything I read online, it just doesn't really tell you much, but we'll get into that. So anyway, about the phases of the moon, something everybody here probably knows already. Imagine you're looking south now, and the sun goes down the sky in the west, and a few days after new moon, we see the new moon present following the sun down. And then a few days later, when the sun sets, we see the first quarter in the south. And then later, a week later, we'll see the new moon rise, sorry, the full moon rising as the sun sets. And then the last quarter of the moon will be coming up about midnight. And then as we approach new moon, we will see the old moon coming up in the sky ahead of the sun. So the question I've got for everybody, and we'll think about the half moon right now, which you'll see in the south, first quarter. Now the question I have for you, what's it like in the southern hemisphere? Does it look like this, or does it look like that? Now if the people who think it looks the same, I say to you, imagine you're standing on top of the world and you're looking at the sun, versus somebody who's on the south pole looking at the sun or the moon. You would expect it to be upside down. Okay, but the people who think it is the opposite in the southern hemisphere, what happens on the equator? I'll answer that one later, so that's just something to think about for now. Okay, basic tides, we've got the moon and the Earth there. And as you know, you see this all over the internet, all through the textbooks. You've got the bulge, one bulge facing the moon and one bulge on the other side. And they don't really explain why that is, except the gravitational effect of the moon, they say. That's okay. Now, the concept of spring tides and neap tides, when you have a new moon or a full moon, you've also got the tidal effect of the sun, which, according to which book you read, is about 1/3 of the effect of the moon's gravity, the way it affects Earth. So when you've got the moon and the sun and the Earth all in the same line, you've got the compounding effect of the tides, and as you would expect, you'd expect the tides to be a little higher there, so go back there. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, and then when you've got the first and the third quarter of the moon, the sun is trying to pull the tides out this way, but the moon is trying to pull them this way. But because the moon's effect is greater than the sun, you do get a high tide by the moon, opposite the moon like that, but not as great as a spring tide. So I think that's fairly clear, I hope, sort of why the tides are like that. Like I said, we will explain later why we get that bulge on the other side of the planet, because I can't find anything online that really explains it. Oops. Okay, this one, again, very similar to the last picture, except it does show you the effect of the solar tide there in dark blue here, versus the lunar tide when you have a spring tide, where it's new moon or full moon. And by the opposite, here you can see the bulge from the sun here, the solar tide, versus the lunar tide there. So you can see now if you've got tides in opposite directions, they're not going to be as big as if they're both compounded. Pretty basic stuff so far. Okay, there's a little bit of an animation. Again, it's not perfect, because when it's neap tide, it shows hardly any tide at all, but it does show the tides increasing when you have a full moon like that. Then it decreases towards the third quarter, and then it picks up again as the moon comes around towards the sun. So that's a little graphic that helps explain that. The other thing which affects the height of the tides is the fact that the moon's orbit around the Earth is elliptical rather than circular. So as you can see, when the moon is at, oh geez, sorry about that. I'll get used to this eventually. As you can see, when the moon is closest, because the force of gravity is inversely proportional to the square of the distance, you have a higher tide or a greater pull from the moon during perigee than what you do at apogee, at its farthest point. So that's another thing that's going to affect the heights of the tides. Also, the Earth's orbit is slightly elliptical around the Sun, and we reach our perihelion, closest point, around about the 3rd of January. Not a huge difference in distance, but enough that when you get high tide near the January perihelion, it's a little bit higher than normal. And in fact, when the moon's at perigee, we call them perigean high tides. And they, of course, if you get a perigean high tide around in early January, then you've really got a big tide. And in the southern hemisphere, they often refer to them as king tides, which is not really a scientific word. It doesn't mean anything, it just means a big tide. But they use it quite a bit in the southern hemisphere. King tides is when everything is kind of working together to give you a big tide. Okay, here's one place, I think it's somewhere off the coast in the States there. And you can see here you've got new moon, full moon. But here you've got perigee at new moon, another perigee here, and close there a perigee at that end. And you can see how the difference in tides, when you've got a perigean new moon or a perigean full moon, the spring tides, as they call them, are quite bigger. Whereas when you've got the neap tides in between, you know, they're a lot lower. Now you might ask, if they're really lined up here, the new moon and perigee, why aren't these tides as high as these tides, you might ask. And there is other influences as well, which we'll look at now. The moon inclination to the ecliptic is just over 5 degrees, but because of the tilt of the Earth's orbit, there is a possibility that the moon could be as high as 28.5 degrees above the equator. And that is why sometimes you see the moon really high in the sky, and other times it seems really low. It just depends what the angle of the moon is at that time. Now, because the moon is inclined, you know, the declination of the moon can be anywhere from 28 degrees to 0. They started at 30, but it's actually 28.5 is the biggest you can get. But you can see how the tides will follow that moon down. So basically, in our northern hemisphere, in the mid-latitudes, the higher the moon is in the sky, the higher your tides are going to be, basically. And this graphic shows it quite nicely there. So that's another thing that's influencing the height of the tides. So there's quite a few factors here. Okay, now one interesting thing about when you've got the moon at high declination, this solid line here represents what they call the tidal, what do we call it there? It's the force envelope, eh? Versus the force envelope here, you know, when the moon is lined up with the equator. Now, when the moon's lined up with the equator, you've got the same pull on either side of the planet there. So you get a high tide here, 12.5 hours later you get a high tide very similar. So we just call those equatorial type tides. Let's say you're away from the equator a little bit, and here's the envelope here, this dotted line here again. You can see that there's a greater pull for the tide on that side, then 12.5 hours later, it's hardly noticeable, the high tide. And we call that a mixed tide. But when you're in the northern hemisphere, in the northern latitudes or the south, and the moon is very high in the sky, at this point here, you can see that you get a fairly good tide when you're facing the moon. But when you come around 12.5 hours later, you're actually below that tidal force envelope, so you don't really get a high tide then. And that is why at certain conditions and sometimes you only get one tide in the 25-hour period versus the 2 tides. So it does get pretty complicated when you look at all of these factors here. Okay, now, one thing I haven't mentioned yet, because the moon is inclined a little bit to the ecliptic by about 5 degrees, the moon, as it's going around, sometimes it's going to be above and sometimes below that plane of the ecliptic. And what this is showing here This grey area here is the the Earth-Sun plane, like the ecliptic plane. But because of the moon's tilt, which is greatly exaggerated here, by the way, you can see that as this rotational effect here, it shows that the plane of the moon is actually rotating as well. And you might think, well, why would that be? Shouldn't the laws of physics keep that ellipse pretty constant? But remember when I did that talk, I think it was last year sometime, I had the gyroscopes out and I was explaining how the effect of rotation on gyroscopes and the forces acting on it. Well, it's very similar with the moon, rotating around the Earth, which has got a bulge at the equator, and that basically tugs and causes that plane of the moon to gradually rotate. And that period of rotation is about 18.6 years, which means, and I think now when I was looking at the moon the other day, I think the first quarter, it seemed quite high in the sky to me. So the next time I see the first quarter, it'll probably be quite high as well. But 9 years from now, it'll be very low, and the third quarter will be very high in the sky, simply because of that plane rotating like that. I know it looks a little bit confusing, and they don't have the moon circulating, but they do have an exaggerated version of how that plane of the moon actually changes over time. And it does make a difference there. Okay, so basically we'll just summarize right now what we've had for influences. Astronomical influence, we talked about the basic lunar phase cycle, which gives you your spring tides and unique tides. We talked about perigee versus apogee for the moon. Closer to the moon, the stronger the pull for the tides. Likewise with the sun, perihelion versus aphelion. And the declination of the moon, of course, depending on where you are, if you're right under the bulge near the equator and the moon is high overhead, you get bigger tides than when you're away from the moon. And terrestrial effects we haven't spoken about, but we must think of it, we think of the tides sort of circulating around the world, but that's not really true. The tides are locked in place, almost facing the moon, and it's the Earth that's rotating under those tides. So when the North America wants to come underneath that tide, it can't really, where's the water going to go? It can't just keep flowing around, the Earth can't keep circulating, it has to go somewhere else. So depending on the way the land masses are oriented, that can make a huge difference to the kind of tides and the nature of tides you'll get. Coastlines make a big difference too. Like if you've got a tide approaching something like the Bay of Fundy, where you've got this huge bay where it gets narrower as you go in, and the sea level floor comes up as you go in, all that tidal water coming in has to go somewhere, so it goes really high, because it can't really go anywhere else. So in fact, they get the highest tides in the world at the Bay of Fundy. Whereas in other places, when you've got sort of narrow river valleys, they tend to kill the tides a little bit. So you can see how tides are very much dependent on the nature of the coastlines as well as the topography of the land, and the ocean floor topography as well. If it comes up shallow really fast, then of course that water's got to go somewhere. And out in the open ocean, the main tides are only about a foot or so. And it's only when the shallower water that causes the water to pile up. And meteorological influence is another thing. We've always heard about hurricanes, how we get that storm surge from a hurricane. Central pressure of a hurricane is very low, which means if you've got higher pressure outside the hurricane, the sea level will tend to rise under the lower pressure. Likewise, when you have higher pressure in the atmosphere, they tend to push down a bit and keep the tides a little bit lower than what you would expect normally. And the other meteorological effect on the tides is the winds. Like I know when they're forecasting floods in Ontario, where I used to work, Great Lakes, they always wanted to know, if you have several days of pretty moderate to strong winds in one direction, it helps push the water of the Great Lakes towards the shore where the wind is blowing to. And that can make a huge difference to get to the tides up and down. So meteorology does influence things greatly, and it's not something you can predict a year ahead in the tide tables. That's something you have to think about at the time, depending on what the weather's doing. Okay, now you've noticed so far that all of the pictures I showed you pretty well showed you the the sun, the moon, and the tidal bulges all lined up nicely. All the textbooks show this, the internet shows this, and it's wrong. And there's a reason for this. I hope you can see the arrow there. Like, we're looking down to the North Pole here, and here's the Earth rotating anti-clockwise. And remember I said the tides really are kind of locked in place, according to where the moon or sun is, and the Earth is rotating under that. So what's happened, as the Earth is rotating, it's trying to drag that water around with it, just like the land gets dragged around as the Earth is rotating. And what's really happening is that the moon is trying to pull that tide back. You know, the world is trying to make it go that way, but the force of the moon is actually trying to tug it back a little bit. And of course, then you've got the solar tide as well, having the same effect. But this is a much more accurate representation of spring tide. It should be angled like that, rather than in a straight line. And that's a big error I see everywhere on the internet. Anyway, as far as explanations go, like I've heard all kinds of crazy ideas about why we have that bulge on the back of the planet. I've heard people doing the presentation, they say, well, the gravitational force of the moon on the, backside of the Earth, over here, is not as great as the force on this side. So therefore, it kind of pulls the back of the Earth in and leaves the tide standing out. I don't think so. That's not a very good explanation. So we have to look for some reason of why is that tide sticking out at the back there. But I think this picture, what it does help explain what happens to the moon in the longer term. Like, we know the Earth is slowing down, we've got the frictional effect of the oceans because we're spinning underneath that tidal bulge, so you've got friction there slowing the Earth down. And they say in the textbooks that because the Earth is slowing down and losing angular momentum, the moon has to get more angular momentum by moving outwards to balance the momentum. I thought, geez, does that make sense? If somebody came with some cosmic brake shoes and they stopped the world turning, does that mean the moon's going to go flying out? I don't think so. But in some ways, there's a bit of truth to that, because what's happening here is that with the tidal bulge being ahead of this line here, you can see the moon is attracting the bulge, trying to pull the bulge back, so it's basically trying to slow the Earth's rotation down a little bit. But by the same token, because the actual force that the moon is attracting a tidal bulge, and the tidal bulge is attracting the moon, because that arrow is above this line, what it's basically doing, it's giving the moon a little bit of a kick along its orbit. And if you have a spacecraft encircling the Earth and you want to raise it to a higher orbit, you just give it a little bit of acceleration in the direction of movement, and it will put the moon into an elliptical orbit, more like this, and then you give it another kick when it's at its aphelion, and then you can raise the orbit out. So with a gradually tiny kick here all the time, because of that tidal attraction, it's helping to speed up the moon, and that is why the moon is gradually going to be moving farther and farther away from the Earth. But then I started thinking about that. And what I did, I made up this diagram here. Now we still got, I know it looks back to front, but we still have the moon going anti-clockwise around the Earth. But imagine that the Earth is now rotating clockwise instead of anti-clockwise. I thought, what happens then? Well, we've still got the moon attracting this tidal bulge. Because the Earth's turning this way now, the tidal bulge will be this way. So you've still got the effect of slowing the Earth down. But because the kick, instead of pushing the moon in the direction of movement, you've now got the force acting a little bit the other way, so it will slow the moon down. I thought, well, that's interesting. If angular momentum is supposed to be conserved, then what's happening to it here? Well, the truth of the matter is that in this case, the angular momentum of the moon is going anti-clockwise, the angular momentum of the Earth is going clockwise. So it does make sense that if the planet was rotating this way, the moon will gradually get closer and closer, and that's why a lot of the stars in the universe, merge. And you can understand it now because of that diagram. Because angular momentum going one way will cancel angular momentum going the other way. So you slow down the moon going anti-clockwise, and you also slow down the Earth going clockwise then, and everything is still in balance. So it does make sense, but you have to think about it. Okay, now here's another diagram I saw, which attempted to explain why we have that tidal bulge on the back, and say, yeah, due to centrifugal force. Really? You mean there's that much centrifugal force on the other side of the Earth? And I thought I was a little bit skeptical of that. But they're sort of on the right track, even though they didn't explain it on the web page. And they tried to show the forces there, like gravitational and inertial forces. And but they don't really explain why would you have these. Oops, sorry. Again. But it still doesn't help me explain why we've got that force pushing outwards there. And in order to understand that, what we have to do is understand about the barycenter. Now, the barycenter, here's the example. The first case there, if you have a binary star system, both stars are the same mass, and they're circulating around a common center of gravity, it's easy to see, you know, how everything is in balance, say. Now, in reality, the stars, most of the stars would have elliptical little orbits, so you would have circulating in elliptical fashion around the barycenter there. Now, here's the example in the bottom left now, when you've got one body is much bigger or much heavier than the other one, like the Earth-Moon system. And if you look at it, it almost looks like the barycenter is basically on the surface of the big body there, eh? Now, if you look at the Earth-Moon system, like this, here's the moon circulating, here's the moon circulating, this line here is the moon's orbit. This line here is the Earth's center of gravity going around about this common, and this is the barycenter here, which is actually about 1,700 kilometers below the surface of the Earth. So the Earth is actually rotating about that in the same way that the moon is rotating about that to keep everything in balance. So if you can imagine now, the Earth basically spinning around this point here, you can understand why you might get a bit of centrifugal force on the outside part of the Earth. But then you think, well, geez, it takes about 29 days for the Earth to do a circuit like that. I mean, how much centrifugal force can you get over a 29-day period? So I still wasn't happy that we're really getting the right answer there. But at least it's showing that with the Earth spinning, if it was spinning a lot faster, you can understand then there'd be much more of that centrifugal or inertial force on the backside. But I couldn't understand how it would really be as big as the tidal bulge on the side where the moon is. So, and this is okay, now this one shows it fairly good. It doesn't show it too badly. And this is the best picture I could find on the net. Here, of course, they're showing the gradually exaggerated gravitational force due to the moon. Now, here you see the barycenter here. And if you can imagine the Earth spinning around that axis, even though it's very slow, every 29 days or so it goes once around that axis, you can appreciate that there would be some kind of inertial or centrifugal force bulging things out to the backside of the moon. But there's a better way to understand this. Now, something about a rush limit. Imagine, I think it was a couple of years ago, there was a comet that was coming in towards the sun, and it was going to come very, very close to the sun, and they weren't even sure if it was going to survive the passage around the back of the sun, because it's going to break up with all those tidal effects. And again, this is a little bit confusing, but imagine here you've got, imagine here's the sun, and here you've got this, some kind of a comet heading in towards the elliptical orbit around the sun. And already you can see these elongated there. And there is a good reason for that, because if you can imagine, okay, you know, low Earth orbit where the shuttle goes up, that takes about 90 minutes to go around the Earth once. As you Earth-Moon system works. So I'll take questions once I get this set up here. Oops. That's not what I wanted. Okay. I'll go back to get that. Oh, yes, that's okay. Okay, any questions about the moon and tides? Anything that wasn't crystal clear, I'd like to know now so I can help explain it for you. So has anybody got any queries or questions? Jim must have done a good job, eh? Okay, well, I guess we're okay, but I think it's about 4 minutes. But basically the video just shows you examples of barycenter which we discussed. It just helps kind of cement the idea, you know, that the moon and the Earth are both rotating about a common center of mass, even though that common center is actually inside the Earth's surface.
I'll go around. You can wait.
So your moon, the Earth is rotating in the opposite direction. The moon gradually closes in on the Earth, but it starts to orbit more quickly. So at some point, it's going more quickly than the Earth is rotating.
Yeah.
And it does the opposite thing and extracts energy from the Earth.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's good to think about these things outside of the box because, yeah. See, there you can see now from the picture, they speed it up and you can get a much better appreciation of the how the Earth and the Moon are rotating at this sector. That's okay, I think we've got the message. I've run out of time, so we can start. And I'm not sure when I'm talking again, maybe next month or the month after, or maybe after that. I'm starting another presentation. It's called Tides in the Solar System. So I want to talk about all the effects that tides have in the solar system, including Saturn and its rings, and a whole bunch of other interesting things. So I'll be doing that on the next time.
All right.
Okay.
All of you think the moon looks the same in the southern hemisphere? Hands up. One. All who think it's different? Two. One thinks it's different?
One.
2, 3. Does it depend on how you look at it?
Yeah.
How many think it looks the same if you lie on your back and look at it?
That's the answer, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so what happens if you're, let's say you're looking at the first quarter from Winnipeg here, and let's say you start going really fast towards the equator. What's going to happen is that the moon is going to get higher and higher and higher in the sky as you go south, and when you get somewhere near the equator, that moon's going to be basically overhead. And once you go south of that, you're going to be looking at the moon like this. So any normal person is going to turn around and look at it that way. So yes, it is the opposite way in the southern hemisphere. And in fact, in Australasia, when you're looking at the new moon setting like that, or the new crescent, as that one gets higher and higher in the sky, when you look to the west, it actually looks like what they call a bowl moon, when you're near the equator there, right? And then as you go further south, then it starts looking like that again. Because in the southern hemisphere, the sun rises on the right-hand side and crosses the sky the other way. It goes from right to left across the sky in the north. So everything is back to front that way. So I hope that explains that. Yeah.
Okay, you can always recognize somebody who's in the southern hemisphere for the first time because they're looking at the stars like this. It only looks right when you look at it like that. president for this meeting. Next meeting, I won't be president, but I'll still be standing up here because, well, we might not be. We'll see who becomes president. I know that a number of you just chafing at the bit to be the president. So what have we got on tonight? We got the community session with Mick. We have What's Up with Brian, who's probably got it loaded on the front of his computer now and just ready to plug it in. Is he even here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. You've started it, have you? Yeah. Okay. Ian Cameron just texted me. Yes, I have indeed acquired a cell phone. It's the third text message I've had. But he says you might not be able to make it to the meeting. That sounds like a car that won't start. Kevin is going to talk to us about printing astrophotos, and when that's done, you're going to elect yourself a new president. So tonight at pizza, I have 2 reasons to celebrate. We'll take our break at about an hour from now, and then we have Dr. Ed Plutus from the University of Winnipeg to talk to us about a very interesting project that he's involved with. Heard from Ed before, and he complains that although he's a RASC member, he hardly ever makes it to this meeting, so we make sure he gets here by inviting him to speak. And then the big complication tonight is Boston Pizza, a regular haunt on Pembina, is undergoing renovations. So I've made arrangements for us to go to the Taylor Avenue Boston Pizza, which is just south of Grand Park Shopping Center on Taylor. And we'll talk about that a little later. Next Saturday, a week tomorrow, is what started out many years ago as our Christmas party, but we all decided that because we all have other parties at Christmas, there's no point in having a Christmas party at Christmas. So we now have a midwinter party, and it will be on the 21st at my house. Well, Judy's house, where I live, which is on Kingsway Avenue near Kelvin High School. So Kingsway and Arrow is the location. And you can tell it's got a whole string of Christmas tree lights strung around the railings on the front porch. So they'll be on. Start at 6, and just go until it ends, and bring food, family, and beverages. It is 4 members, but you're welcome to bring a guest. So I hope to see usually 5 of you there. We typically have 30 or 40, so the more the merrier. The house is big enough to handle us at any point. The new journal is out. No notice about that yesterday. You all have access to it online, and some of you get it in hard copy. So you can go into the address and the email that was sent to you. If you didn't get an email, it means that you have never registered an email with the national office. So if you think you'd like to find out about it, there's amazing articles in it. Something about the black drop effects during the transit of the Mercury and Venus. Well, and maybe we'll see what it's like. I haven't read it yet, but there's an article about the Big Moon, and CFHT chronicles all of the discoveries that CFHT has made this year. Some of them have been covered ongoing in the journal. So there's the link, RASC.ca, and then the title for that is nice picture on the front too, but it looks to me like somebody didn't quite get the camera center. You never can tell, because when I was editor, the guys that laid out the front page often some horrible liberties with the images. Most often they tended to put the little menu on the side over top of the image. architect one, so they all built the same. Telescope loans. Did anybody book a telescope for this month? Good, because I've got one for you. Stan is off attending to family matters in California right now. I think he looked at the forecast, decided that his daughter-in-law should break her ankle at this point. Good time for him to go south, go live this cold weather. Mike Caracas, our new editor of the Winnicentrics, would be happy to hear from you. I hope you all read Winnicentrics because we had some, we put an oversized issue together. We'll see whether Mike can continue to write columns for Winnicentrics. And the last thing I have to say is about our email discussion list, that if you want to be on the local discussion list, if you want to know who's going out to Birds Hill Park and to look at something, and you're welcome to join. If you want to know who's going out to Glenley to do some observing that night, doesn't mind a little bit of company, that sort of thing, then you have to be on the discussion list pretty well. Certainly have a few people who are willing to go out in all but the worst kind of weather. Mr. Belcott talking about you. And that is what I have in my message. Does anybody else have anything to add? We have down here magazines that Paul has brought in to give away. And you know what our rule here is, if you don't take it away, it gets recycled. And he even brought some boxes. I don't know. So help yourself to these. And Ed has brought along some souvenir items from the Cyrus Rex mission that he's in. We'll hear about that. So now, Brian.
Is it on now? All right, great. Awesome. All right, where will we? All right. Okay, so this is booked up for January. Of course, Brian's up, which is really nice. Okay, now for the planets. Not really much happening for the planets. I think it was at Mars and Venus is going to be your evening planets, and the rest is going to be your morning planets. And I'll give you a better view of what I really mean by that. All right, this is either top or bottom down view of it. So as you can see, right there, so we got Venus and Mars, of course, it's going to be your evening planets, and your Jupiter and Mercury, and a little bit of Saturn is going to be your morning planets. Now what I've done for next time, here I'll show you the next slide. Okay, is it going to play? There we go. Okay, so this is going to be the motion of the planets for the next year. Let me give you an idea of what's going to be up. Now, if you look at the top part of it right here, can I give you an idea? So that's January 25th, 27th, 28th, I get the idea. Now we're into February. So this is going to be the motion of the planets for the next year. Now, when it's a little highlighted right here, that means that we're in view of Jupiter. And then Saturn's going to appear. Now, we won't see Mars this year, but we'll see it next year. which is, I don't know, was it 23 arcs across, I think, is it? But it'll be pretty low in the sky. Now Saturn comes into view now, and we're in April right now. For a couple minutes. Okay, so we're in June right now. Of course, you can see how slow Mars is. And of course, Neptune's going to play right now. I really don't mention Neptune or Uranus because it's just, you can't really see it. I try sometimes, like a little blue dot, my 8-inch dot, so not really worth mentioning it. So right now we're in September, I believe. We're slowly coming up to Mars. We're October now. It's just going to be for 1 year. Anyways. Stop it there. You guys can get the idea. All right. So again, this is what we have for the planet. For the evening, of course, we have Mars and Venus. It's early in the evening. Now, just ignore this globe. I don't think they're quite good at picking what the evening globe is, but can give you an idea that so Venus and Mars are going to be your evening planets. Next, we're going to have now early morning. We're going to have I have Saturn here. What else do I have here? I should have Mercury right about here. So I don't have Jupiter, it's right up here. So Jupiter now, pretty much for the most part of the sky. That's starting tomorrow, that's early morning. Now, oh really? I think I missed one. Okay, no I didn't. All right, okay, so for our celestial calendar, this is what we have. Just a meteor shower, but of course, it's coming out. Of course, Saturn's going to be 4 degrees, but the new moon on 28th, and of course, which is I thought was quite nice, that January 31st we have Mars and Venus and waxing both 6 degrees apart. That should be within the field of view of the standard binoculars. So that might be interesting on the last day. All right, so this is what I have here. Okay, so early evening, again, just ignore this glow. I try to heighten the enhance the images, try to brighten this area a little bit more for you guys. So of course we have Mars, we have Venus, and we have the waxing crescent moon there. Hopefully that should be within the view of the binoculars, but we'll find out sure enough. Okay, now, oops, I didn't change this. Something went wrong with my files. Okay, ignore this Honda here. This shouldn't be here. All right. I think it didn't save it right, did it? Nope, it didn't save it. There we go. I don't know what happened there. System crash, I think what happened. Okay, so what happened was, okay, so around 10 o'clock in the evening, I'm going to bring this up because, of course, my favorite object is going to be the Orion Nebula right here. So you got Orion right here. So that's going to be the highest point around January the 14th, around 10 o'clock p.m. It's going to give you an idea of what constellations we're going to have out here. This is not really a very good image here. I'm going to have to work on that. All right, so kind of give you an idea. So roughly about 10 o'clock, we're going to have Orion Nebula. All right, I guess I'm sorry. That's it. That's all I have for now. Those comets are, they're in the sun now. There's supposed to be a couple, which I'll try and find a little bit more information. I looked at it earlier, but some are going to get between Earth and the sun in February the 14th. I tried to, what I've done earlier was, I tried to go on to that computer simulation and try and record it to show you what Comet 45 Honda is going to do, and there's a few other ones, but they're going to be in between the sun and the moon on February the 14th, but unfortunately they're going to be below the horizon, right? So we're not going to be able to see it. But I'll find out a little bit more next time.
burn.
Yeah, have you tried it yet? How about 45 feet Honda?
Honda.
Right.
I don't know if that's still visible.
Oh, there you are.
No, it's right on the horizon now.
Okay.
It was when I shot it was about the last time because it would move here. And now it's, you have to wait till March or late March, or late February for it to come out and work.
Why don't you come up because you're talking next? Okay, no questions for Brian. We're not going to grill him about comments that are behind the sun. Thank you, Brian.
Can you hear me? No, I should quit. Okay, this talk of mine will be quickly, but it won't be very long. It'll be a very short one because Jay was giving me the gears to speed up, but we lost one of our presentations. Yeah, so this one's all about printing astrophotos. Spent about, I don't know, you'll see in the slide how many hours I spent actually doing astrophotography. I started out like 1979, getting my first print, and those happened to be the solar eclipse in Winnipeg. Yeah, I know I'm getting old. But they just told my parents a little Instamatic, took a picture of the sun during its eclipse, didn't get very much out of it, because I was kind of grade 4, so I don't know what was I going to do. But it was actually a start, and it was a start on the road to astrophotography. So I traded this like Einstein. As you can see, like, it's over here, kind of how you say here, methods to capture light to display. I brought a couple of sample photos, so after the presentation, you guys can actually take a look and see how I mounted them and see what type of options you can actually have. So why print? You have to look at the bigger picture. Why am I doing the hobby if I don't plan to actually go and actually display it at all? I want to just keep it locked on the computer or just keep it locked on the screensaver? No, I wanted to push it on. I finally got good enough to compete some of the best astrophotographers in this country, and I wanted to start showing my photos for what they actually look like. So, shows like I spent literally 30,000 hours, if I calculate back since 1979, how many hours I actually spent under the stars, actually imaging, and well, it was only 11,000 hours for in the digital age where CCDs and DSLRs actually became fairly common. And you know what, that may sound like a lot of hours, but if you take 11,000 hours, you go back to 2005, it's only like about 50 to 60 times out of the year, and using about 4 or 5 hours a night. So that's what I look like on a typical imaging. I don't know if my buddy is Ron is here, but this is a picture Ron took of me back in this past August, we're sitting out at the pit. And it's just a typical imaging session. Set your telescope up, and away you go, and you collect the images, you bring it home, and it's time to kind of, you look at it, it's on your big screen, you want to display it, you want to show it, you can throw up a few photos on like Facebook or on your own personal web pages, but it was time to actually start printing. So what do I do it? Like I said, I'm trying to gain all these photons, I want to display it, so I go out, I spend the time to photograph, I spend traveling around to actually go and get the images. It's not always the best. If you take a look at January today, or even the last few weeks, there's been 50 bloody people in this country. So you travel. You move around the country. You actually go. Every little yellow dot behind me is the spot that I've gone, whether it be in the middle of Florida, all the way up to Thompson, all the way to the southwest, which I'll be heading again right away anyways, and they're usually the bulk around where I live, which is in Winnipeg here. So that's a travel map where I actually set up a telescope. So that is why we all love photographs, right? I think we all love photographs. And it is, find me a house out there in the world who doesn't have a photograph in it hanging, whether the house, unless it's just being built or it's burned down to the ground. It's about the only house that won't have a photo in it. Or a building, or any type of business, you always find something on the wall. So, displaying physical pictures, I believe, are actually kind of attractive. I enjoy looking at pictures whenever I go in somebody's house, and it's a proper way to show off your work, You have visitors or people, your friends come over, take a look, and it's not a boring plain white wall. There's actually a picture. Those who are going to go to Jay's Christmas party pretty soon, got pictures all up and down this house, up and down these staircases. Everybody loves a good picture. Yes, you got one, you got a Eclipse picture there. Let me see, you forgot. Yeah, it's her house. So, on the wall, that's a display. This is my rec room in my house. I display the pictures. Only in the basement. I don't have any astrophotos upstairs in the house. They're all kind of in the basement and the rec room. So I'll show you down in the basement. This is what they look like. Otherwise, it's a poor white wall with a few little plaques on the wall. So, this is what I'm going to break it down quickly into. I'll go over this quickly. It's like the resolution, the mounting, the finished computer, where to go, and recommendations, Kevin's recommendations for doing a proper print. How to print. Things to consider. You have to work your own technology. I'm not joking. Yeah, what you see on your computer, what you see here, you have to tune your technology to match what you're going to get for display. Resolution is probably one of the key things that you're going to go. You're going to take your picture. Yeah, everything is going to look at 1 inch on the stamp sides. It's all going to look good. Try printing it up to a poster size, 24 by 36. Well, that little thing that's fitting on the poster stamp ain't going to look any good anymore. So you have to choose your resolution kind of accordingly. Me, I like using 300 pixels per inch. People here who use Photoshop will see. You can actually set that up how high resolution you want your photograph to actually appear. Mine is 300 for 11 by 17. I'll go to 450 to 600 pixels per inch if I'm shooting on that size. Because you have to work with people when they take a look at the photograph. Most of them aren't going to stand back and say, hey, a lot of people come up and they're going to actually go close to it. They say, like, that's cool. Or Jay, and you got a little flare on that star here. Yeah, that's the first thing I heard from them. So you can see what works. Yeah, so you work part of that's working the technology. Mounting options. Picture frames, gator board, foam core, wood. They all have their strengths. I'm not a fan of picture frames, as you'll see in the next frame, and I'm not a big fan of using the wood. Gator board or foam core are the ones I choose. Foam core and gator board are kind of the same, except the gator board has more of a wooden, sort of more stiff surface behind the foam core. Frames? No. Anyone why I don't like frames? Yeah, there's billions of them out there. There's billions and billions. There's all types of colors and shapes and sizes, but they don't work for me. I don't like them. They can be expensive or very cheap. As the fact is, you walk into a house that's got a glaring window. You look at the frame that usually has a cover on it, using a picture frame. Well, you can't see the picture in the background because all you see is the shadow or the light from the window behind you. Or you get the next person comes over and you stare and go, wow, look at that frame. Was that ever neat? You know, I could have the Wizard of Oz and Toto in there, sitting there with Osama bin Laden having a pina colada, but he wouldn't have seen that because they're staring at the frame. So I said, forget this thing. I'm trying to show off the astrophoto. Remove the frame and show the picture for what it is. This way you don't have a secondary focus. Yeah, maybe later on, after a while, your frame will take the emphasize. This thing you don't actually have to dust. There's no dust that can collect on the edge of the frame. Finish. Glossy or matte. Those are the choices on your paper. There are people out here who have experimented with metallic and optical acrylic. Trust me, you don't want to really go down the optical acrylic path. It's extremely expensive. It's $327 to get a print this size of using a special acrylic that transfers the optical color right through. It gives it a beautiful 3D. A lot of times it'll have grommets in front of it. Sure, if you've got a multi-million-dollar business and you can put the little plugs in there or grommets on here and stick it on the wall, I'm not paying that crazy amount of money just to show that. And then there's the canvas wraps. Everybody's seen the canvas wrap when you take it, you got the canvas sticks out about a couple inches away from the wall, and you separate it into 3 or 4 pieces. So you take the Orion nebula, you put like M42, and you put M43 here, and the little NGC 1977, 6 inches over, so it kind of spreads it out to make it look like an art scene. It dulls it up a little bit considerably, and it also shows banding a lot more on the canvas wraps that I've seen. Computer. It's another thing you guys got to really consider. Most of the computers you go on the screen, this is, it's not a WYSIWYG. It's not what you see, it's what you get off your screen. And you bring that picture that you stole off your computer screen, bring it into the photo lab, you get your picture back. All of a sudden you're ready to get into a fist fight with the guy behind it because, hey, that's not what I ordered, but that's what your computer's printing out. So you have to work the technology. And I'll give you a little bit of information on that quickly after. And then after that, if you guys are colorblind, there is no way that your computer screen, which is a backlit LCD or LED, is going to print all what you see on the picture. It has no background lighting source. Your lighting source on your photographs on the pictures are coming front face at it. The pictures you see on your screen are being lit from in behind. It's a total world of gamma difference. You got to work a thing that's called a gamma. Well, if you have Photoshop 2.2 is a very good one to use. And then monitor choices, billions of them. This is my photo lab that's in my basement. I run 4 monitors. I run 2 i7 computers. The 2 ones on the far right are 4K ultra high definition monitors. The 2 on the left side are my testing computers. And yet it's the same video card running on the 2 on the left there, and you can see one's really bright, one's considerably dimmer. And the same monitors. This is how they are displayed. What I did is taking my technology, I see the picture how it is in the comet that I shot, I think, I can't remember the exact comet, a couple years ago, but you can see the streamers are flying off on left and right, but you don't see them as easy on the one on the right. Well, the one on the right is my testing ground to what is equal to what I get out of a photo lab. So I know how to set my photo before I even go in there. I just put it on the stick. When it comes up on the right monitor, that's the picture I am going to get. Not the one on the left who shows absolutely everything, including uneven background brightnesses and everything else and so on. I have to work the image on the right to get it to look how I want the image. It's the best to start off with like a little 4x6 or 8x10, go into Photoshop, take a couple of little small ones, they only cost $1.99. Do a couple of experimentations, bring it home, point it in front of your monitor, you're looking at the picture, or I'm going to set my monitor to look like that, or you get a dual display, you get 2 monitors, and you said, okay, this is what I'm going to have, this is what I'm going to work on. That's the way I found it the easiest. At that time, monitors are fairly cheap now, it's easy to do. Where to go? Some people here have their own photo printer. I used to. I got sick and tired of the ink drying out and sick and tired of paying a high cost on buying inks. So I gave up on that idea. There's lots of photo labs in the city. Used to do a photo lab. It used to be, I think it's where Don's Photo is now. Or you find yourself a nice friend who's got an expensive printer or a company, somebody who owns a printing company, you will see them. Wally World, I only gave them a 2 out of 5. They're kind of out to lunch when it came to doing astrophotography. Yeah, baby pictures, wedding pictures, seeing mountains, they had no problem at all, but when it came to doing astrophoto, they were kind of out to lunch. Walmart, London Drugs did a very good job. I gave them a 4 out of 5. And these prints up here, they are done for London Drugs. This is the one on St. Patel, that's the only one we have in the city. They did an excellent job. $22 for 18 by 24, and it was $9.99 to get it mounted, to get it glued and mounted onto the phone cord. It's cheap enough. You're not doing a million of them. You do one or a couple every year. It's very reasonable. So my recommendations. If you're going to go print, make sure your file size is just 20 megabyte or larger. Don't go in there with something like this 500K. That's going to laugh at you. It's not going to show for really very good anyways. Avoid JPEGs. There's a lot of options, especially if you use Photoshop, that you can use the TS Pings or the Photoshop or the PSDs, but don't use JPEGs. They're not friendly, and they're usually more rough cut of a photo image. Again, 450 pixels per inch or more. Use glossy paper over matte or wraps. You're trying to get a contrast. Some art people here will disagree, say, well, matte does this, matte does that, or satin paper does this. I'm telling you guys to use glossy. You're doing astrophotography. You're not doing landscapes or scenery or baby or wedding pictures. Use glossy if you're doing astrophotos. Construct a quality image. Just don't go in there with some haphazard looking image and expect the best out of it, because photo printer ain't going to correct it. It's going to print whatever you have there. So you have to start with a good image. Spend the hours on developing. Spend hours or whatever collecting data on the same object over and over and over and over for days or nights or weeks, and bring the quality image in if you want quality shot for a picture from that. Like I said, sacrifice some small images, $2, pair it with your home monitor. That's the easiest thing I can tell you to do. Don't let the lab text adjust your picture, ever. There's a kiosk in London Drugstore which you can click on the little box there and it says, let our experts set the proper whatever on your photo. No, do not click that photo, whatever you do. Do the photo that you see on your screen. And use foam core, that's kind of one of my favorite. Also, like I said, $9.99, you can't go wrong. And in your house or apartment or garage, if you happen to live in one, it doesn't matter. Use proper ambient lighting, because if you walk into an area that's this dull or in a closet, you're not going to see what the photograph looks like. You need the front light hitting it, but not directly, so it shines back in your eyes. You're trying to show off your photo. And the last one on this one is 3M sells this little Velcro sticky things. They fit on the back of the picture. You'll see them they're off the tabs. They don't wreck your wall at home. You stick one on the wall, it peels off very quickly. Your picture sticks onto it. You're not banging a nail in it. You're not hanging screws on it or pounding it. It's a no damaging. They aren't cheap though. It's like $18 or $12 for it. Just a couple of them. They're not cheap, but they do work very well. That's it. Any questions about that? Yes, sir.
Do you have an opinion, just curious, if you've tried any of the hardware-based monitor calibration, like the Huey or...
Yeah, I've tried, when I had my own photo printer, I've actually used, that Spider 3 and Spider 4. I did not like the ICC profile that it actually sent to my computer. It ended up goofing up my monitor because it was sending me this different type of color correction, and I actually saw what I was seeing with my eyes visually. And not that I need glasses, but sometimes I'll take magnifiers to look at fine pixels just to make sure that I'm getting the data I want. But there's one other thing I forgot to mention. If anybody ever actually going to print a photograph, you can give me the file, you can come over to my house if you want to see what your image is going to look like. I've got enough expertise to know what the image, I've helped my buddy Brian, I showed what imaging should be like, and if you guys want to ever have a preview, bring it over, I'll throw it onto the computer, you'll have an idea before you bring it into a photo lab. But not for a couple of months, because I'm gone for a couple of months. So we'll wait till I come back from the Southwest. That's it. Okay, no questions.
Embed the color profile in the image before you print it?
Yes, that's the ICC profile.
For computers and for screens.
And one violation of the rule, you can let the text change your picture, but you have to be standing behind them and tell them, yeah, I want that one. So in a way, you're doing what Kevin suggested. You take your picture to them and say, that's not the way I want it, do it this way. But LabWorks does a nice job, although they cost a little bit more. Well, Ian just sent me a text saying he'll be here in 20 minutes, which is the same as saying he won't be here. So now we have another little job to do here. And that is, to elect a few people. I'm thinking for this project that what I should have done is put you all on the executive, and then solicited emails from those people who didn't want to be elected or something. And that way it would have been easier to do. So I'm taking the liberty of running the election because I'm not running for election, and it's the job of the past president, which I'm only a few minutes away from being. So, although we have some complexities with people who can't be here tonight. I don't know who your president will be, but I do know who your president won't be. And this is about, for those of you who don't come to very many meetings, this is the only meeting in which we cover off business. So we tend to focus on astronomy and not on business. But if you join council, then you tend to do business. So
So we have a kind of lopsided council. We have 4 executive positions and we have 5 councilors. And there are all but 2 up for election just from their 2-year terms. And so all of the executive positions, president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer, are due for renewal. And we have 3 council positions that are due for renewal. So let me go through these one by one. I guess this is probably readable as it is. And I'm going to, these are people who have been nominated or who have agreed to stand for the positions. And to begin with, Brendan Petrasek has agreed to move from the vice president position to the president's position. Are there any other nominations or even volunteers to become president? When you point your finger at somebody and they're going like this, I take that as a no, I don't want to stand. I'll ask once again, are there any candidates to stand for president? I'll take that as a no, therefore Brendan, who is away today, will be your new president. And I think he should insist that he gives several presentations in the course of his 2-year term. Brian Stack, where are you, Brian? Has allowed his name to stand as vice president. Brian is the former secretary. Are there any other nominations or volunteers for vice president? Ray is not responding, Kevin. Ray would have to miss anything that happens between March and November. You gotta run a farm. I'll ask again, any other nominations for vice president? Any volunteers who wish to become vice president? Okay, I'll declare then that Brian is the new vice president. Now you'll see we have a blank for secretary, and that's because Brian was our former secretary. Now the secretary has a difficult job because we like them to attend all 4 or so of the council meetings that we have every year. And I think we also give the secretary the job of bringing the poster that hangs out front, which isn't there today. But it's in my garage. Do I have any volunteers or nominations for the position of secretary? I'm going to browbeat one of you at least for that job. I will let that go for now, but it will be filled. Stan Runge has allowed his name to stand for treasurer. He is the current treasurer and has agreed to hold on. He
Can't afford you with our money.
California with your money, right? Now he's living off his son. His son's rich enough to support the old man. Anyway, do I have any nominations for treasurer? The rules of order forced me to ask that question twice. Do I have, actually, you're supposed to ask it 3 times. Do I have any nominations for treasurer? You can look me in the eye. You don't have to look at me. I perfectly understand that nobody wants to be treasurer. All right, Stan Runge will continue as our treasurer. I have a mistake on this. There are 3 positions open and we have 4 candidates for councillor. Would one of the candidates for councillor like to volunteer to become the secretary? Avoid the necessity for a ballot. Nobody's going to nominate. Okay, Chris, can you come down and give me a hand? I could pass out paper, but I would ask that the candidates go outside the room, and we'll do it with a show of hands. And I will assume that each one of you votes for yourself. And I will introduce you as you go by. Ralph, Kevin Nolka, Kevin Black, Paul Paradis. Just so you can associate a face. You get to vote for only 3 candidates. Force me to count the number of people in this room and find out I have 20% more votes. All right, let's begin with a pen that works. University pen. All those who would raise their hand in favor of Kevin Galka. Chris, can you do the counting on that? You do that, Bay. I want up high. You did all of them, did you? Okay, all of those for Kevin Black. All right. How many? 23. Within one of what I got. Ralph Cronin. Okay. And for Paul Paradis. Okay. Kevin, Galka, Ralph, and Paul are elected. Thank you all very much. I tried to persuade Kevin to be secretary, but I know he wouldn't want to be. Well, gentlemen, congratulations to Kevin Galka, Ralph, and Paul. Thank you very much. 10 minutes. I've had a few absentee yes, appointments. Am I doing something next? Yes, well, we're 12 minutes ahead of schedule, so we've got time for it. So you're 12, so I'm limited to 12 minutes. I can do that. As long as we can have coffee in the midst of your presentation.